Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Geek and Speak, the Geek and Seek podcast. Today we are talking about token decks, how to build token decks, our experience with token decks, some of the cards that you should try playing if you're going to build a token deck, things you should try to avoid, stuff like that. Should be a good time. Join with me today is Jason. How's it going, Jason?
Not too bad. As you may notice, I am not in my usual habitat. I actually moved out of that apartment recently, and I can't move into my new apartment until August 14th. So currently I'm staying with my mom and dad. I am in their basement using my mom's desk. If you see any doggies walking around, one of them is mine, two of them are my parents. Yeah, it's a good time. I like being here.
It's fun being homeless. And then we also have Preston with us today. Preston, how's it going, man?
Good. This is a fun theme. I think we're gonna have a good discussion today.
Word up, word up. And then hello, I am your host, Morgan. I am also doing really good. I don't know if I've talked to the guys about this, but I actually just sleeved up my first paper standard deck for the first time in a long time. Look at that, Liliana of the Veil. Oh, she's ready to go. She's ready to go. She's ready to go. I'm so excited. They're doing so at basically all LGSs. They're doing standard tournaments, and if you win, you get a textless Urza Saga, which is hilarious because that card is word vomit. So the fact that there's a textless version of it is incentive enough for me to go try to win one. So we'll see how that goes. If you would like to support the show, you can do all the YouTube algorithm stuff that you're supposed to do, liking the video, leaving helpful comments. Go check out any of our other videos you haven't seen. Like I said, we've done 60 episodes of the podcast now. We have our Commander gameplay series. We have deck techs, all sorts of stuff that you can go back and check out. We have like 220 something videos at this point. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can support us over at patreon.com/geekandseek YouTube. And then patrons get to see some videos a little bit early. And most importantly, patrons get to see a bonus episode of our Commander gameplay series. I started editing that. That's coming together pretty well. It's a super fun theme with some really fun decks, and a lot of weird things happen, so you'll want to see it. So become a patron if that sounds interesting to you. And then if you want to join our Discord, you can find a link to that in the description of this video. All right, we're going to spend a little bit of time on some news today. We were making this a weekly part of the show, but we've had some topics that we thought were going to go long, so we haven't been doing much news, but we feel like there's enough to talk about that we want to spend a little bit of time on the news this week. So Bloomburrow is out officially. Like, it's on Magic Arena. You can go pick up the precons, the sealed stuff. You can start ordering your singles. Bloomburrow is out. And let us know in the comments. What are some of your favorite cards? Are there specific things you're excited to build, excited to play with? What have you guys thought about the set? Have you got to play much with the new cards or anything yet?
Haven't got to play with them yet, but I'm still very excited for when we do get to. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, outside of playing, with like you guys playing with our group, I don't really play a whole lot, so I haven't gotten to play a ton. But I am very excited to get to play with these cards. This set is very, very spicy.
Yes, I agree. I've been doing a little bit of brewing with some of the new cards on Arena, so might make a new Bloomburrow Arena video at some point in the nearish future. But yeah, a couple days after this video is coming out, we will have just filmed the Bloomburrow episode of our Commander gameplay series, so tune in for that. We got some spicy decks. We were just looking over Preston's deck and cringing at some of the things that are going to be ensuing, so make sure you tune in for that when it comes out in a couple weeks. That also means that standard rotation happened. I'm sure that's, obvious, but I am a big standard guy. I'm really interested to see what this does with the shakeup, because we're losing both Innistrad sets, Streets of New Capenna, and Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So a lot of really important things are leaving the format. So I'm very excited to see how things shake up. Now that we have the 3-year standard rotation, things are, staying around longer, things are more diverse. What the heck is it going to take for me to get my homies to play some standard with me?
Pay me.
Find a way to make sure. Yeah, you build all the decks, you spend all the money, and somehow convince every single person on the planet to stop playing Commander.
Yeah.
Just those three small things, and we're all
Okay.
yours.
Okay. I'm excited. I got all my scheduling stuff from my LGS. I'm actually going to be able to go play some Paper Standard, get in some events. And like I said, guys, this is a great time to get into Standard because the rotation just happened. This format hasn't settled. It's really a free for all. You can really get away with a lot of crazy stuff, especially with the new Bloomborough cards. So if you want that Textless Urza saga, head down to your LGS, get involved. They were joking about money, but Standard is a lot cheaper to get into than most of your favorite Commander decks. So keep that in mind. And the only other news thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because this seems really weird, Wizards is doing a rules change question mark with phasing. So the idea is that they are no longer going to say at the beginning of your at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, they're not going to use that wording anymore, and they're going to replace it with at the beginning of your second main phase. That's what they're going to change going forward. And when they made that announcement, people were like, okay, sure, sounds good, whatever. But then it sounded like that they were going to go back and errata a bunch of old cards. 18 cards in specific, I believe, if I remember correctly. And most of them, not a big deal. If you change that, not a big deal. The one that was a big deal was Nihab. I believe it's Nihab the Eternal from Hour of Devastation, which says at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you add a red for each damage that was dealt. And that goes infinite with Assault. What's the card? It's the enchantment. That aggravated assault. So you pump that mana into that, and you just take infinite combats. It's a very, very popular thing to do in mono red aggro style commander decks. And people were about to go ballistic on Wizards of the Coast for doing this. But so they've now flip-flopped, and now it sounds like Niheb is going to be fine, and it's not going to get the errata, but they've gone back and forth on it. So all this to say, going forward, I don't really care about the rules change. Like if they want to like stop using that phrasing and they want to change the phrasing, doesn't make a big difference to me. However, did we just do the Sonic the Hedgehog movie thing with Wizards of the Coast? Did like the Niheb players just bully Wizards into doing what they wanted, or was there really just a miscommunication? Because currently, I think on Gatherer, the errata text is there for Nihab, even though it's not supposed to be there. What is happening at Wizards of the Coast right now?
I think maybe they thought it was gonna make like the format healthier, I guess. But at the same time, it's like, don't you don't need to change the way, because it's okay. It's not like that. There's like a ton of Neheb the Eternal decks running around, that are just dominating playgroups or dominating games. Like it's not like I've never once played against a Neheb the Eternal deck.
It's ranked 330 on EDH Rec.
Decently popular, but not something that's like everyone is building. You want to change the way that you format cards in the future. I think that's fine. If you think that it's gonna make the future of the game healthier and not make it as toxic, if that's the fear, then I understand that. But you don't need to go back and change cards that are fine just to make them worse, because that is objectively making Neheb worse, and that's just going to be a feel bad for a lot of decks that are built around Neheb, because it's like I feel the same way about this as I felt about when Golos got banned. I was like, I understand the reasoning for the ban, but it just didn't feel like that it was so oppressive that it needed to be banned,
Kinda. I mean, I felt like it was probably better to just ban Golos, but at the same time, it's like there's so many other broken degenerate things in Commander that are not banned. We just like the playgroups just self-regulate. Like they're like, hey, this card's too strong for our playgroup, let's just not play it. And I feel like given enough time, that would have just happened with Golos too. Maybe not, because maybe he would have just stayed like the go-to good stuff 5-color deck commander. Like maybe he needed banned anyways. But yeah, I could see the argument for that. What do you think about this, Preston? This seems like a bunch of crap.
I really hope it's the them getting bullied thing because they really needed that. Like this is what the fifth or sixth completely changing how they word cards thing they've done in the past year, and like for some of them potentially a good thing. This one maybe not, but ruining Naheb the Eternal of all cards. I feel like there's a few commanders that I would rather see get screwed over than him. Just a couple.
Well, and I am also, Neheb's been reprinted twice, I believe, and I believe strongly that cards should function the way that they look like they function. So, like, if you're going to do an errata, you need to reprint it so that there is the errata text on the physical card. Like, when we went to, we got the showcase versions of the companion creatures in March of the Machine, they had the updated wording. Not that they couldn't do that with Neheb, but they'd have to find the right opportunity to do that. That sounds like a lot of work. And then all of the other versions of Neheb that exist no longer do what they say. Um, so that just doesn't seem good. It just seemed sloppy and unnecessary. I feel like if they want to change it for cards going forward, that's fine, but it doesn't seem necessary to go back and change the old cards unless you're just specifically trying to nerf the combos. And Neheb's like the only one that has a combo.
He got reprinted in Murders of Karlov Manor, and he got reprinted in Commander Masters with a new art that like actually looks pretty nice. So if you want to play that cool looking art, it's not going to have the right text on it. So that's annoying.
You know what's also annoying is token decks. So that's what we're going to be primarily
Hey.
talking about today. So did you guys know that according to EDH tokens are the 6th most played theme? So people really like their token decks. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of different kinds of tokens. As we're going to get into, part of what we'll be doing is going over the different kinds of token decks the three of us have played over the years. What do you guys think about the best colors for tokens? If you're kind of skimming through, you look at a lot of the top commanders, a lot of the most played cards in that theme on the EDH Rec page, just edhrec.com/theme/tokens. You could build a token deck in any color, and probably any color combination. But I feel like, in these other episodes like this that we've done, we felt like it's worth having the discussion still, even if it's technically possible to play this theme in any color. What are your strongest ones? Preston, you debatably have the most experience with token decks. Why don't you start us off with that?
So in order, I'd say white and green are pretty much tied. I mean, white can pump out a few more, green can make bigger ones. Then you have red, which is basically just as good as the other two in regards to how many cards that make tokens. It just doesn't have as many token like doublers or whatever. Black is good at tokens because it doesn't make as many, but it has a lot of those like ETB and like death triggers. So, you get a little more value out of your tokens. And then blue is definitely the weakest of the five, but again, you can still absolutely build good blue token decks. Specifically like artifacts or flyers are the two big ones, I think.
Blue also just has like some cards that are just generically good, like Marnius Calgar or Adrix and Nev are very strong commanders that have blue in them. But I think I agree with your ranking. I might nitpick between red and black because, like you said, black does have all of the draining effects and your pinging and your sacrifice, getting extra value out of them. But red is very, very good at making specific kinds of tokens, specifically treasures. Like that's kind of red's thing, and you can go ham with that. So I more or less agree with the ranking. Anything to add to that, Jason?
Yeah, I would say that you hit the nail on the head with as far as what colors are the best. White's definitely going to be the best at token making. Um, Green is definitely going to follow up with that. I thought about it for a second between red and black, but red. You pretty much pulled me over the edge with red making treasure tokens, because I was thinking, it's like, well, red could make like dragon tokens and goblin tokens, makes a lot of goblin tokens, but then yeah, it's a lot of cards in red that make treasure tokens. But black isn't anything to turn your nose at when it comes to making tokens, because there's a lot of black cards that'll make zombie tokens, they'll make rat tokens. Um,
It has some treasure stuff.
yeah. I mean, Revel in Riches. That's a pretty big win con for some decks. Um, so I think that I definitely think that blue is probably the weakest. But when you're building a blue token deck, it's going to be a strong deck, just because blue is a pretty strong color, and if you're focusing on that one theme, you're gonna have a pretty strong deck. But I do think that black and red definitely edge out blue as far as token generation.
I also kind of forgot about Brutaclad. That's a very popular Izzet commander. So red and blue, and that's insane. There's a lot of degenerate things you can do with that. And the other, there was another blue thing I was going to mention, and it escaped my brain. Oh well. Why don't we go ahead?
A bunch of different Simic ones.
Yeah. There, like I said, there's a lot of like standoff blue things that you can do. So let's go ahead and go over what decks that we have had over the years that are token decks. Do we have anyone who wants to specifically start?
I'll kick us
All right,
off.
Preston, lead us through any of your token decks that you have had currently or in the past. What makes them different from each other? And yeah, maybe just highlight a strength or weakness on each one.
So my first tokeny deck was my first deck ever in Commander. It was Trostani. So that deck wants to make a lot of creature tokens, because when the creatures come in, I'm gaining life equal to their toughness. Trostani has not proliferate. Or is it? No, it's populate. That's it. Yeah, so she has populate, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I have better uses of mana sometimes, but that's the first deck I built that had a token theme to it that I like put some effort into. I have Krenko, Mob Boss, goblins, doing what goblins loves to do, which is pump out 1,000 babies and use them as ammunition. I have Mari the Killing Quill, which makes a lot of treasure tokens when creatures are dying and I'm hitting people. We have Lulu plus Clancrafter that has a lot of artifacts, and a couple of those cards make artifact tokens, which are good sacrifice fodder for Lulu and Clancrafter. And then finally, my big one is Benny Brax, and that just makes a lot of different types of tokens. It makes some creature tokens. There's a couple enchantment things in there, so there's a little bit of that, but it's mostly the creature, couple treasure Trojan tokens, I think, and yeah, that's mostly it.
Cool. Jason, do you want to go next?
So, the token decks that I have, I'll start out with Othari. Othari was the deck that Tommy built for me for the Christmas episode, and I think that deck is really cool. That's really making Rebel tokens with the experience counters that I get from Othari. Also, that deck has plenty of artifact equipments that will make tokens when they enter and then attach to them. So it's really creature token based. Kaith is another one that I have that I recently built for the Modern Horizons 3 episode. That is tokens with giving my other creatures fabricate. Now that isn't necessarily mainly tokens. I definitely want to be putting +1/+1 counters on things as opposed to making tokens in certain situations. But there's definitely some token synergies in the deck. The next one that I have is Miracle, Lord of Bones, and that is me turning my creatures into enchantment tokens by sacrificing them or wiping the board and having them die and then bringing them back as enchantments. And there's some really, really cool combos that you could do with that. So it's really fun, having all these different creatures with static abilities that you sacrifice and turn into enchantments as tokens. And then I have Gimbal. Gimbal's making gremlin tokens based on the number of tokens that I have that are different names. So that one I'm making a variety of different tokens, food tokens, treasure tokens, map tokens, and then making token copies of creatures that I have that aren't tokens. Um, just so that whenever I get to my end step, I'm making my gremlins as big as possible. But then my best token deck by far is Thalise. Thalise has been on the channel twice. It won both times that it was on the channel. It's a deck that I've had for years. I'll probably never take that deck apart. And that is just strictly token value. Like, make as many tokens as I can on my turn and make as many tokens as I can on my opponent's turns so that Thalise is triggering at each end step and I'm just making more and more and more tokens. Thalise is definitely the strongest, and I think that it being black and white kind of helps keep it in that strong, you know, it helps keep it stronger than my other token decks because white, like we said, is the best token maker. But then getting all of the like board wipes and tutors, and then the other token generators that black is going to have, it really makes the deck powerful.
Yeah. So my only token deck I have currently is Marnius Calgar, and it is actually a clue deck. It's loosely based off of the Morska precon, but I cut green, added black, and it's just making clue tokens, which is a lot of fun. There's a lot of weird clue cards that I started playing Magic when Shadows over Innistrad was the newest set, and that's when clues were introduced. So I have fond memories of it. It's fun game to play with some of those old cards. Does suck not having green in that deck, but I feel like Marnius Calgar is so broken that it's worth it. But I do have 2 Esper decks right now, so I am thinking about cutting blue out and going with Teysa, the one from Merge at Karlov Manor, going with that as the commander and going Orzhov. But I already felt bad about not having green, cool green investigating cards. It would be sad to also not have the blue ones, and a lot of the best ones are blue, so I haven't decided if I'm going to do that. But that's the only token deck I have right now. But I have had a lot of decks that are kind of token decks. So one that you guys will actually get to see on the channel in a couple episodes is my Prosper Tomebound deck. So Prosper is all about playing stuff from exile, but when you do, you are making treasure tokens. So it's actually really like about half of the deck is just dedicated to having payoffs for all those treasures, because it kind of, when it goes hard, when it goes off, it goes hard. And you want to be playing all those cards that like trigger when you're sacrificing those treasures, when you're making your treasures and stuff like that. So it actually ended up being a very token heavy deck, really leaning into the treasure payoffs. Several episodes ago, I played a Thopter Typal deck led by Brea. That was just kind of a meme, but it was kind of a token deck. A lot of the Thopter stuff is making Thopter tokens. There are like actual creatures that are Thopters, but you have to go, if you want to go wide, which is the way that you can try to go for a win playing Thopter Tribal, is you have to go wide. You have to play tokens. So that was kind of a token deck. It was largely just an artifact deck in general. I had 2 kind of zombie token decks in the past. I recently took my Scarab God deck apart, which was Dimir zombies. It had a lot of zombie token stuff in there. And the Scarab God can make eternalized tokens of things that are in graveyards. So there was a lot of token shenanigans in that, because again, that's another one of those tribes that like you want to go wide. So I was mostly leaning into zombie tokens. And then I also had God Eternal Oketra, which is not really a zombie deck per se, but whenever you cast a creature, you make a 4/4 zombie token with vigilance. And I found that that deck was at its best if you just like get Oketra out early, play a bunch of small creatures that give you immediate value, and when you do that, you're also getting the zombie token. And because I found that that was the best way to play that deck, I was just also, playing Mondrak, playing an Anointed Procession, playing these token doublers because they were just good enough at getting those extra big bodies in play. So it kind of ended up turning into a bit of a token sub theme and had a couple other token payoffs in that deck as well. And then the last one is Hizazon, which I've only played this deck a couple times, but it's a land destruction deck. And it just kind of has a bit of a token sub theme just because it's when I play my deserts from my graveyard, I make sand warrior tokens, and that's just kind of my win con. I'm just going to keep my opponents from doing stuff, and in the meantime, I'm going to be chipping away at them. And then that deck, kind of the same thing. I'm also running Mondrak and Anointed Procession in that deck. I believe there's a doubling season in there, so stuff like that. Which leads into a interesting part of this conversation, which is token doublers. There's quite a few of these. So Steven, I asked him before we recorded this, because Steven has 2 token decks. He has a Chatterfang deck, and he has a Adrix and Nev deck. And I asked him if there was anything specific he wanted us to talk about in this episode, make sure we highlight, because those are a couple of his favorite decks. And he said that the token doublers is the biggest thing. What do you guys think about these token doublers? Do you think that they're all kind of about as good as each other? Do you think that there are some that are better than others? Do you think that there are certain color combinations or anything that benefit from them more than others? What do you guys think about the token doubler cards?
I really think if they're in your budget, you're supposed to play all the ones you can, really. Like, maybe there's a couple I don't know about. They're just so bad, no one ever really uses them. So maybe they're just, I don't know about them. But all of the ones that I can think of, if they're within someone's budget, they really should go in the deck. They're just so powerful when you're doubling or sometimes tripling your output.
Oh, right, because
It's such an easy
the
way
white
to.
one from Ixalan, right? There's a
Ogier Talk.
Deepest Foundation. Yeah,
they're all insane. So, like, if you have the $30+ to spend on them, they're worth it for sure. But it really just depends if you can justify spending that.
that is an interesting part of it that I hadn't thought about, is that all of them are expensive.
Yeah, that's like $30+ per token doubler or tripler in Ozier tax case.
Yeah, Odritac is, I'm just kind of looking at the prices here on EDH Rec, but this is $28 for that. There's Mondrak.
Mondrak is 45.
Yeah, Mondrak's 45. Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, those are expensive cards. Anointed Processions, also like $40, I believe. They're expensive. The only cheapish one is Adrix and Nev Twin Casters. But that just got reprinted, and it's still $4. It was like $15 before the reprint, and even then, you have to play Simic. Whereas all the other token doublers, they're only one color, right? So it's a lot easier to fit them into more decks. Whereas Atrix and Nev is a creature, so it's a little bit easier to remove than some of the other ones, and you have to be in Simic X in order to play it. So it's a lot more narrow than the other ones.
There's also ones that are like making a very specific time of token, like Chatterfang gives you an extra token whenever you go to make tokens, but that's specifically a squirrel deck. So there's ones like that that aren't as expensive, but you have to go a lot more narrow in what you want to do with the tokens.
So the other interesting part about token decks that I've found is kind of difficult in finding the right balance to, and I feel like Jason's probably going to have some really good insight on this, is token producers versus token payoffs, because you have to have both, right? Like, you want to have your token payoff. So like there's what's it called, divine reclamation, is that the card that, like, whenever you make a token creature, you make a 4/4 flyer with it's like a Sarah Angel. Like, those kind of cards are insane. There's a lot of cards that do things like that when you make the tokens, you're going to do something that makes it even crazier that you made those tokens. But then you also have to make sure that you have cards that actually make tokens. So you don't really have a lot of cards that do both. You don't really have a lot of cards that make tokens and are a payoff. Like, there are some, but there aren't as many as you would hope. Jason, your Thalys deck, someone had mentioned in a comment section a while back that you only have 18 cards in your deck that actually make tokens, and everything else is just lands or payoffs. So, what do you think about the duality that is token generation versus token payoffs?
So, when it comes to making tokens, specifically if you're making creature tokens, because while Thalys does deal with a lot of different types of tokens, it's mainly making creature tokens so that I can swing with them. If you're building creature tokens, you can have a lot of cards in your deck that will make a bunch of tokens, or at least have plenty of cards in the deck that make tokens, so it's like it outnumbers the number of cards that either give you the payoffs or are doing other things that the deck needs. um, but not having enough payoffs for making tokens isn't going to secure your win, because now you're just making a bunch of probably really small creatures that can either easily be chump blocked or be blown away by even, a toxic deluge for one. Um, so I think that it's important to have plenty of cards in your deck if you're making a token deck, if it's specifically a creature token deck, that is going to give you payoffs for creatures, for creature tokens, like either entering the battlefield or like the anthem effects that are going to buff your creatures and make them bigger. And I think one of the best examples, it's not in the same colors as the least, but Perforos is a really good example, because it's going to be dealing a bunch of damage to people whenever stuff enters. So if you're in like a deck that has some token doublers, and then you have Perforos, now you're doubling the amount of tokens that you're making, so you're doubling the amount of Perforos triggers that you're getting. So it's really important to have enough cards that will give you value for making tokens. Otherwise, you're just building up a board that is going to be pretty easily wiped away.
Yeah, did you have anything to add to that, Preston?
I when I- In my opinion, I think the best way to go about it is to try to have like a 55 to 60 split on your token makers to your token payoffs, in my opinion. Like when you're looking at the cards that deal with tokens in your deck, 55% to 60% of it should be making the tokens, 45 to 50 should, or 45 to 40 should be the payoffs.
See,
I
and
think that's a good starting point.
my pushback on that is if you if you have more cards in your deck that will give you payoffs for tokens, one of the things that's going to allow you to do in the game is kind of fly under the radar. Because if you play something that gives you a benefit when you either make a token or when a creature enters or something, it's not a card that's doing anything immediately, and so people aren't necessarily going to look at it as a huge threat, and you're able to add more of those pieces to your board. That way, when you do cast that one spell that makes you a bunch of tokens, you're going to get an insane amount of value for it, and the rest of the players at the rest of the players at the table are going to kind of feel like it came out of nowhere, because they just allowed you to set up with these pieces where like, oh well, that doesn't really do anything right now, it's fine, he's not a problem, oh that's not really a big deal, I'm not too scared about that. But then you got all these pieces set up, and now you start making tokens, and now you start generating a bunch of value, whether that's making other tokens, drawing cards, dealing damage to people, what have you. It can really catch people off guard if you go that route. Whereas if you just focus more on generating your tokens, you're building up more of a board state, drawing more attention to yourself, and people can see you as more of a threat, because it's like, oh, he's got all these creatures, he's just one card away from making them really big or doing something really crazy to them. Maybe they're worried about you playing like an Ashnod's altar or a Phyrexian altar and sacrificing the tokens to make mana, what have you. So that's my opinion on that.
I can see that argument. I I think about it like if you have your payoffs on the board with no tokens, they're not doing anything, and you're just kind of at the mercy of everyone. But if you have the tokens on the battlefield without the payoffs, at least you still have some creatures to defend yourself. But I don't think your opinion is wrong. It probably depends on the playgroup a lot of the times, how aggro your
Does it
playgroup
also
is.
matter what kind of token you're making? Does that matter at all? Because I mean, we kind of mentioned before, like there's a lot of different kinds. Like there are like creature tokens, but then there's also like tokens that like it doesn't like they're not helping you in combat. They're not chipping in for damage. They're not helping you block. Like there's a like does the kind of token you're making factor into this at all, or is that kind of
If
nitpicky?
you were making treasure tokens, you were the threat. 99% of the time, and people are going to acknowledge that. At this point in time, people know treasures are powerful, and you should always focus on treasures. If they're making a bunch of them, they're probably the threat.
Yeah, the type of token matters greatly because if you're making creature tokens and that's your primary game plan, your win is definitely going to be different than if you're prioritizing making treasure tokens. Because if you're making treasure tokens, then likely what you're going to be doing is putting all that treasures into big mana spells that are going to do really big, powerful things that are going to help you win the game. Whereas if you're making creature tokens, the idea probably is to go wide and just swing people out with combat damage. So I think that that definitely is an important factor.
Cool. Well, the only other thing I wanted to make sure we hit on was strengths or weaknesses for tokens. Like, what should people be aware of? Like, if you're going to play a token deck, accept that you lose to this, or accept that this is going to be something that you have to overcome if you're going to play a token deck. What should people be worried about?
The biggest one is board wipes. Most board wipes are going to have a way to hit your tokens, so just acknowledge that.
I think that, you know, board wipes might be the biggest, but honestly, if you think about the colors that tokens are the best in, green and white, white particularly is the best color at protecting yourself. So, you know, you could plan ahead for a board wipe or something catastrophic like that in a game plan by just adding a couple more protection spells into your deck to ensure that your board isn't as affected as everyone else's. And kind of the same with green. Green definitely has some ways to protect itself, you know, be that heroic intervention or other things like that, snake skin veil, things of that nature. Um, so I think it really more depends on what colors you're building as far as what you're going to be looking out for as far as what's going to stop you from winning the game. Because if you have a token deck that has blue in it, then you know you probably have a lot more options for card draw. So even if something does happen, you're able to draw into the other cards that are going to help you restabilize your board and get yourself back into a position where you win the game.
Well, even to your point about protection, like if you're playing a blue token deck, at least you have counter spells. Like even if you don't have heroic intervention or Teferi's protection, you have counter spells, which kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, and then even in red, you know, if you have a bunch of tokens on the battlefield, you're likely playing like Goblin Bombardment, something like that, so that if something does happen and, you know, a board wipe's coming in response, you can just sack all your tokens and deal a bunch of damage to people. So I don't necessarily think that board wipes are the biggest problem. I think that static abilities that your opponents have that are going to affect your creatures, specifically making them weaker, like giving like -1/-1 or -2/-2, something that is going to kill your tokens immediately as soon as they come in. That's going to be something that you want to look out for more. So I think that especially if you're running a token deck, targeted removal for certain things is going to be really, really important. Because it's a little easier to respond when things happen in the game as far as like board wipes and stuff, and it's a little bit easier to rebuild. But if somebody has something on the battlefield that's just preventing you from doing what you want to do in the first place, that's going to be a real difficult obstacle to overcome. So making sure that you're planning ahead for those types of situations and that you can deal with those problems when they arise in games, it's going to be really important to have pieces like that in your deck to help you overcome that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess I guess something else that I just thought about is also propaganda and ghostly prison are super duper annoying in go wide decks, and token decks typically, like, there are some like go tall token decks, but like they're mostly go wide, right? You Yeah, those cards are already annoying. They're even more annoying when it's like, hey, all my creatures are 1/1s, but I'm supposed to be able to kill you because I have 300 of them, but that doesn't help if I have to pay 2 mana for each one I'm trying to send at you, right? So, yeah, to back up Jason's point about make sure you have some targeted removals, so you have options for if you get into those situations, or just expect it to be a long road to the end of the game. I guess we have a little bit more time. I guess let's also ask this. what are a couple of your favorite cards for token decks? Whether it's a really big card that's going to help you win the game, something really flashy that you're like, whoa, that was super over the top. Because tokens are kind of win more once they get to a certain point, right? So, and that's what Commander's all about. It's all about being a Timmy, right? So, what are a couple of our favorite win cons or flashy cards or favorite cards?
Academy Manufacturer is one of the
Oh
big
my
ones.
god.
If you're making any of those type of tokens, you should have that card in your deck. It's worth pumping out a little money for it, basically always.
It's not expensive, is
Going
it?
from one.
Hasn't it been reprinted several times at this point?
I don't think it's too much, but I thought it was a couple bucks.
Cheapest one is about $1.50 now because it just got reprinted in one of the Bloomborough precon. So that is the lowest it's been though. So yeah, keep that in mind. I think it is one of those cards that creeps up a bit.
Yeah, go pick up a couple copies of that.
A couple of cards that I really like in token decks. I mean, I feel like the most obvious one for a creature token deck, if it's in green, is Craterhoof Behemoth, because you make a whole bunch of 1/1 tokens. Then you cast Craterhoof. You got 15 1/1 tokens. Excuse me. If you have 15 1/1 tokens and you cast Craterhoof, now they're all going to get +16/+16. So you have 15, 16, 6, or 17 17s. And then you have Craterhoof itself. Another card that I really like for token decks, and I play this in Thalisse, is Ink Shield, because it's a fog built into a token generator. And I think that that's going to be really powerful. And it is really powerful, especially when, an opponent thinks that they're either going to deal a lot of damage to you, kill somebody at the table. Well, I guess the Ink Shield is just preventing damage that's happening to you. It's really kind of a way for you to turn the tables on your opponent and maybe take them out on your turn when they thought they could take you out on their turn. Those are probably my two favorite cards for token decks.
Inkshield's a great mention too because I've never played Inkshield before because I was like, that's a lot of mana for a fog. I don't want to do that. But I've died to Inkshield multiple times. So I got one finally from the Sheldon Secret Lair, and I put it in my Marnie's Calgar deck. So we're gonna take it out for a spin, see what I think about it.
Yeah, I've killed people with Ink Shield many times.
Yeah. One that I wanted to mention because it's won me a game of upkeep before is Secure the Wastes, which is for X and a white. It's an instant that says you create X number of 1/1 warrior tokens. I believe it's warrior tokens. That card is insane. Late game, you can just make a ton of bodies. Just wait till it's about to be your turn again. You just kill people on. They won't see it coming. That has won me a game of upkeep before. It's awesome. And then if you are playing a deck like that where you have a bunch of specifically 1/1 tokens, you're going wide, you care about the 1/1 bodies or whatever, Skull Clamp is going to be your best friend. So that, because you're going to have a ton of extra bodies, right? If your deck is working, you can afford to lose some of them to draw some cards. 1 mana draw to is insane, turns out. So if you are a deck that can pull off Skull Clamp, it is going to become the one of, if not the best card in your deck. So keep that in mind.
Another card I want to mention is Akroma's Will. Even if you're not buffing up the power of all of your creatures, Akroma's Will is going to be really good even if you just have a bunch of 1/1s, because first of all, it's going to give them double strike, so now they're hitting for 2. But they also get Flying, Vigilance, Indestructible, and Lifelink. So you're going to gain a whole bunch of life, and your tokens aren't going to die, even if you're swinging into really big creatures.
We already talked about it, but Divine Visitation is probably my favorite overall. I just love turning my 1/1s into 4/4 angels. One of my favorite cards of all time. I'm sad I don't get to play it more often in Commander.
I don't think I've ever got to play it in Commander, which sucks because I have one of those really cool alt art versions from Ravnica Remastered, and I want to put it in a deck, but I just don't have a home for it right now. So I'm hoping that changes because that card is just super freaking cool. Like every time Jason plays it in his Thalisse deck, I'm like, oh, we're gonna die, but it's so cool. So
Finale of Glory is also a really good one. If you have a lot of mana available, this is definitely something that you play late game to win the game. You make X 10 or more, and now you're making a bunch of 4/4 flying angels with vigilance, and probably going to be able to swing somebody out on your next turn. If you don't have any type of haste enabling going on.
So this is a newer card, and it's pretty color restrictive. So it's not going to be able to go in all token decks. But this is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This is Campbell, Profiteering Mare. Whenever one or more tokens your opponent's control enter, for each of them you create a tapped token copy of it. It only triggers once each turn. So if your opponents are making zombies from their Fields of the Dead, or they're making treasures from whatever, you're going to get one. And then it also says whenever one or more tokens you control enters, each opponent loses a life and gains a life. So this is great because it's, I think a lot of decks, even if you're not playing against token decks, will just have cards that make tokens. So this will just passively get you a few tokens here and there from what your opponents are doing. But more importantly, if you are playing this in a deck that's just going to be making tokens, you're going to be draining your opponents for a lot. You're going to be gaining some life, giving yourself a little bit of extra time with that extra damage they're going to have to deal to you, and you are killing them in the process. So this is a new card, and it's pretty color restrictive because it has to be white and it has to be black. But if you fit that requirement, I've seen this in a lot of Commander Clash games, and it is insane. So, yeah.
If you have the colors March of the Multitudes, that's one of the best token makers in the format because it has Convoke. So all the tokens you already have makes another token for you, and they have lifelink. So that's a good way to take what looks like a medium token army and make it into a huge one to win next turn. I like that card a lot too.
Cool. Well, I think that's all that we had for this episode. Did you guys have any final notes on token decks?
Don't be afraid to put as much token generator and token payoff into your deck as possible. Like, if you feel like you're not putting enough stapley cards into your token deck, you're probably going to be able to get away with that, especially if you're really going heavy in on token generation and token payoffs. So really, be okay with having a lot of redundancy in your token decks, because if something does happen to your game and, things do get destroyed, you don't want to have to take a long time to rebuild, because a slow rebuild in a token deck can be brutal and it can be almost impossible to win that way. So be okay with having a lot of redundancy, and maybe cut a staple or two just to make sure you have enough redundancy in the game.
I do agree with that, but make sure the staples you're cutting aren't lands, because I see a lot of people build token decks and cut so many lands. I don't know why token decks specifically seem to have this problem, but I've just seen a lot of people get stuck at like 3 lands with their token decks, and they just don't do anything all game.
Yeah, your
The
secure
only
the waste looks really bad when X equals 2.
the only pushback I would have from that is if the type of tokens that you're really focusing on is treasure tokens, then maybe you don't need to run as many lands, because you're able to generate mana through your tokens.
But to be true
but
with
you
Prosper. Like in my Prosper deck, I ran, I believe, 36 lands, which is on the low-ish side for me. And several of those lands were fetch lands. So it's even less lands that actually tap for mana. And I found that I was able to get away with that because it made so many treasures. That's also true if you have like Smothering Tithe, right? And because Smothering Tithe is an obnoxious card that shouldn't exist, but it's going to give you an insane amount of mana. And because you're also in white, that also means you have the opportunity to play catch-up ramp as well, which I think people should be playing more than they do. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I kind of agree, but I think the general Commander community is like, oh, 30 lands, that's fine. It's not. So
It is fine, though.
Oh my god.
You don't count.
All right. We are. Wow, this episode ran really short. Anyone got anything cool they want to say outside of the world of Magic, real quick? We haven't got to do that in like several episodes. We said that we have it on our template to do it every episode. We're like, we're going to talk about something cool outside the world of Magic, and then like it rarely happens because we go long, but we haven't gone long. We haven't gone this short in a while. So Jason, you're moving. That's pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I can't move for another 2 weeks, so that's kind of sad. But I'm excited. One thing I am really excited for now that it's August and we're right around the corner, football season's coming back, baby. Man, you guys are gonna get real tired of me talking about the Lions on every episode of this podcast.
Watch them just suck. Yeah, watch them just suck this season. They had like most baller underdog story last season, and they're just gonna come back and they're gonna suck.
Not gonna happen.
Preston, what about you?
I don't know. I've just been focusing a lot on Magic lately. I'm just so excited with the new set. Past couple sets, I've been a lot more happy with the game. I've just been focusing a lot on it, so I'm pretty content right now.
What about you, Morgan? What about you, Mister Wife, kid, and another on the way? How's life outside of the world?
It's very busy, my friend. It's very, very busy. Yeah, good. Junior is he's halfway. My wife is halfway through pregnancy number 2, so that's
wait. Time out. Junior?
Yeah, we're just calling him Junior. We haven't settled on a name yet. We have a couple of names that we're floating, but we haven't settled on anything yet.
You should name him Junior.
No,
not Morgan Junior. Just
it's a
Junior.
good way to guarantee he's gonna get bullied. Yeah, but good. So I think a lot of people know this, but Steven and I are in a band, and we actually a few weeks ago played a festival in Missouri. So that was a lot of fun. We got to we don't travel as a band very much. We mostly play semi-local, so getting to travel for that was really fun. And this last week has been a nightmare for me on my email thread because of the band, because we finally got like an opening with we signed a record contract. And we finally have the ball rolling on trying to get a release date and stuff set for that for the record. And I got the first draft of the mix back a couple weeks ago and got notes sent back for revisions and stuff. So I'll have more information later, but it's been a busy couple weeks for Steven and I's band as things are becoming official and things are rolling in that department. So that's pretty exciting. All right, guys. Well, we will be back next week to talk more about this children's card game. Make sure you are subscribed. Check out other episodes in the meantime. And we'll have other content as well. Like I said, we have a Bloomborough Commander gameplay video coming out pretty soon. Probably next week, I believe. I don't know. The timeline's gotten a little screwy. But we will see you guys later. Bye.